10 European countries that are turning against Donald Trump. Predictions for 2025. They once stood as pillars of a shared vision: democracy, diplomacy, and unity across continents. But in 2025, the tides are shifting. What's causing key European nations to rethink their loyalty to Washington? Why are traditional allies distancing themselves from Donald Trump's America, despite decades of close cooperation? This isn't just about politics. It's about leadership, global trust, and the future of international balance. Across capitals like Paris, Rome, and Madrid, leaders are making choices that could reshape the Western alliance. In today's episode of The Journey of Wisdom, we'll explore the 10 European countries that are slowly but decisively turning away from Trump in 2025, and why this matters not just for geopolitics, but for all of us navigating an increasingly uncertain world. Number 1. United Kingdom. In a world where alliances are no longer carved in stone, the United Kingdom in 2025 is showing us what it means to adapt with intention rather than reaction. Once known for its unwavering special relationship with the United States, Britain has begun to redefine its path, not with resentment, but with quiet confidence. As the winds of global politics shift, so too has the UK's posture. In March of this year, the country unveiled the AUKUS Economic Alliance, a forward-thinking financial and technological partnership with Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Japan. What's particularly noteworthy is that the United States, often seen as the de facto leader in such initiatives, was notably absent from the helm. This wasn't a mistake, it was a message. Britain is no longer waiting for Washington's lead. The change is subtle, yet unmistakable. Like a seasoned chess player making deliberate moves after reading the board, the UK is now acting from a place of strategic autonomy. Britain, once deeply tethered to American foreign policy, is now loosening that grip to avoid being pulled under by uncertainty. This evolving stance is most visible in the UK's latest defence white paper, which signals a tangible move away from reliance on US military infrastructure. Instead, there's a clear pivot toward reinforcing its own capabilities and expanding deployments in the Indo-Pacific region, a zone of growing economic and strategic importance. It's as though Britain has looked beyond old maps and decided to redraw them for the world it sees ahead. At the same time, British intelligence is making bold moves toward digital independence. New initiatives in secure digital infrastructure aim to free the UK from the vulnerabilities of shared systems and foreign oversight. This pursuit of digital sovereignty is about more than cybersecurity. It's about owning one's future. Even within Parliament, once unimaginable phrases like post-Atlantic strategy are no longer fringe. They are becoming doctrine. Discussions about global agility suggest that the UK's leaders are no longer looking across the Atlantic for every cue, but instead scanning the horizon for diverse opportunities. These ideas have trickled down to the public as well. In a 2025 survey, only 38% of Britons expressed confidence in the current US administration's ability to act in their national interest. That number, while startling, is not born of bitterness, but of a growing awareness that in an age of shifting alliances and uncertain commitments, trust must be earned continuously, not inherited from past wars or treaties. This transformation doesn't signify a break, but a balancing. The UK still values its relationship with the US, yet it's no longer the cornerstone of its identity. It's a powerful reminder for all of us living in an interconnected but increasingly fragmented world. Reliance is not the same as partnership, and true strength comes from choosing your direction, not simply following another's. In modern life, we too must ask, are we moving through the world with awareness and sovereignty, or merely out of habit? Like Britain, we can quietly yet firmly revise the story we're living, rooted not in fear or rejection, but in the wisdom of self-trust and long-term clarity. As the Zen saying goes, let go or be dragged. And the UK, it seems, has chosen to let go and lead. Number 2, Poland. Let me ask you something. What do you do when someone you've trusted for years suddenly becomes unpredictable? Do you cling to the past, or do you start preparing for a future you can count on? That's the question Poland is asking itself in 2025, and the answer is reshaping how the country sees its long-time alliance with the United States. For decades, Poland was one of America's most faithful allies in Europe, hosting US troops, naming military bases after American presidents, and backing Washington in almost every international conflict. But now Poland is beginning to reconsider the price of that loyalty, not because of a falling out, but because of a growing sense that relying too heavily on any one partner, especially one as unpredictable as the US, has become in recent years might be a strategic risk. Earlier this year, the Polish government approved a sweeping €14 billion investment into its own weapons manufacturing sector. Officials aren't calling it a split, they're calling it insurance, a form of protection in case the phone stops ringing or support disappears when it's needed most. That term says it all, doesn't it? Insurance is never about betrayal, it's about responsibility. And responsibility is exactly what Poland is embracing now by strengthening its own military, deepening ties with regional alliances like the Visegrad Group, and collaborating more closely with Baltic neighbors who understand the stakes. These aren't just defense decisions, they're decisions rooted in a quiet but powerful understanding. Security starts at home. But the changes don't stop at the battlefield. Poland is also turning its focus to energy independence, cutting new deals with countries like Norway and South Korea. Why? But no. Because energy is influence, and influence is power, and in today's complex world, no nation wants to be caught off guard if global dynamics shift. Meanwhile, public opinion is evolving right alongside policy. As of April 2025, 65% of Poles still value the relationship with the United States, but nearly half say they no longer trust that support will always be there. That shift in mindset, from certainty to caution, reflects something deeper, a cultural and political awakening to the idea that resilience comes from within, but not from hoping someone else will save you. And really, isn't that a lesson for all of us? Whether we're talking about nations or individuals, the wisdom lies in balancing trust with preparation. Poland isn't slamming the door on its allies, it's simply reinforcing the walls of its own house, making sure that if a storm comes, it's ready to stand on its own. As we look at this transformation, it leaves us with a valuable reminder: loyalty is not blind, and preparation is not betrayal. In your own life, are you building your strength on foundations that can weather change, or are you still waiting for someone else to hold the umbrella? Because sometimes the most peaceful path forward is the one where you're not afraid to walk alone, at least for a while, until you know who's really walking with you. Number 3, Estonia. Let me ask you something. What would you do if you lived next door to a powerful neighbor with a history of crossing boundaries, both physical and digital? Would you wait and hope someone else defends you, or would you start preparing to defend yourself? That's the very real question Estonia has been wrestling with, and in 2025, they've made their answer crystal clear. For years, Estonia has been one of the United States' most loyal partners in Eastern Europe, especially when it comes to defense. They stood by America through thick and thin, confident that NATO, and by extension the US, would always be there. But today, that certainty has started to crack, not out of bitterness or betrayal, but out of clear-eyed realism. The world is changing, and Estonia is changing with it. Leaders in Tallinn aren't waiting for promises, they're acting. They've dramatically increased local weapons production and taken a bold step by spearheading a Baltic-led rapid response force alongside Latvia, Lithuania and Finland. It's a powerful signal. Estonia is preparing for a future where help might not arrive on time. Have you ever had to rely on someone, only to realize they might not be there when it counts? That's where Estonia is right now, and instead of panicking, they're planning. What's even more striking is their focus on cyber defense, because Estonia knows that in today's world, wars don't just happen on battlefields, they happen on servers and networks. After experiencing devastating cyber attacks in the past, Estonia has taken matters into its own hands. In early 2025, they finalized a major cybersecurity alliance with Japan and Germany. Their goal? A firewall that's strong, smart, and, most importantly, free from American control. One official even described it as a firewall without a US plug. That phrase stuck with me. It's not anti-American, it's pro-independence. In a digital age where information is power and breaches can mean chaos, Estonia is choosing self-reliance. And here's the thing. It's not just the government making these moves, the people are thinking differently too. A recent leak from the National Security Committee revealed that Estonians are growing more anxious about putting all their trust in US military support. Polls from this year show a 19% drop in public confidence when it comes to depending fully on America for defense. That's not resentment, it's caution. And to be honest, I don't blame them. In a region where even a moment of hesitation could lead to disaster, Estonia is doing what any of us would do if we truly wanted to protect what matters most. They're building their own shield, their own response, their own future. So here's the real takeaway. Friendship is valuable, but it should never replace responsibility. In your own life, are you taking steps to be secure, independent, and prepared for the unexpected? Because Estonia's story is more than geopolitics. It's a lesson in self-trust, in taking initiative, and in building strength before you're forced to test it. If you've watched up to this point, you're clearly someone who values understanding the shifting tides of global politics. Comment below with global insight to show you're tuned in to the world stage. Don't click away just yet. There's more eye-opening analysis ahead about how Europe's stance on Trump could shape 2025. Stay with us to uncover the predictions that may just redefine the political landscape. Number 4. Denmark. When a country as measured and reserved as Denmark begins to shift its course, it's worth paying attention, not because of loud declarations or dramatic exits, but because of the quiet power in decisive action. In 2025, Denmark, long regarded as one of America's most reliable European partners, is carefully but clearly redrawing the lines of its strategic priorities. This isn't rebellion, it's renewal. Earlier this year, Denmark proposed a significant boost in defense spending, an increase of 1.2% of its GDP. But what truly stands out is how that money will be used. None of it is being funneled into US-led operations. Instead, Denmark is directing these funds towards strengthening its collaboration with Nordic neighbours and EU allies, focusing on building a more self-reliant regional security framework. What's driving this change? At its core, it's about trust, or more accurately, the erosion of it. After years of watching US foreign policy swing back and forth, depending on who sits in the Oval Office, Danish leaders are no longer comfortable tying their national defense to a relationship that can shift with each American election cycle. And honestly, can you blame them? When consistency fades, so does confidence. But Denmark's recalibration isn't limited to defense. It extends deeply into technology, where the stakes are arguably just as high. In a bold move that caught many observers off guard, the Danish government expedited legislation to develop national AI infrastructure, not by leaning on American giants like Google or Amazon, but by partnering with tech leaders in Germany, South Korea, and Japan. This shift sends a powerful message. Denmark wants digital sovereignty, not digital dependence. They're thinking long-term, building systems that serve their people without being at the mercy of political shifts in another country. And this cautious, calculated shift isn't just coming from the top. The Danish public is feeling it too. A recent survey found that only 42% of Danes now trust the United States to consistently protect European interests, the lowest level in over 2 decades. That kind of drop doesn't happen overnight. It reflects a deeper awareness that security today isn't just about alliances, it's about resilience. Denmark isn't abandoning its friends, but it's making sure its house is in order in case help arrives late or not at all. So, what can we take from this? In a world that's constantly changing, placing all your hopes in one partner, one strategy, or one promise can leave you vulnerable. Denmark's story reminds us that real strength isn't about who you've always depended on. It's about being ready with or without them. In your own life, are you building systems, whether emotional, financial, or relational, that can stand on their own? Because sometimes the wisest choice isn't about walking away, it's about walking forward, guided by a compass you can trust. Number 5. Belgium. Let me ask you, what do you do when the partner you've always counted on starts sending mixed signals? Do you wait, uncertain and exposed, or do you begin quietly building your own safety net? That's the position Belgium finds itself in 2025, and the steps it's taking speak volumes. As the host of NATO's headquarters and a long-time symbol of transatlantic unity, Belgium has traditionally stood side by side with the United States, confident in their shared values and mutual defense commitments. But now, that confidence is fading. Belgian leaders, watching the unpredictable waves of US foreign policy, especially under the Trump administration, are no longer willing to gamble on consistency. In January, senior officials began advocating for a strategic pivot, moving key military infrastructure under EU-led defense frameworks so that Europe, including Belgium, can act decisively even if Washington hesitates or withdraws. That's a huge shift, and it reflects something deeper than political disagreement. It reflects a survival instinct. But this isn't just about tanks and treaties. It's also about economics. After fresh tariff threats from the US rattled Belgium's major export sectors, especially chemicals and aerospace, the government began actively reshaping trade routes. That means looking eastward, toward Asia and the Middle East, for new partnerships that can provide the kind of stability the US no longer guarantees. These aren't short-term fixes. They're long-term safeguards designed to make Belgium more resilient in an increasingly uncertain world. And while all of this might sound like a top-level government strategy, it's being echoed loudly by the people themselves. Internal polling from March 2025 shows that only 39% of Belgians still trust the US to defend European interests over the next 10 years. That's not just a statistic, it's a signal that one of the most historically pro-American nations in Europe is rethinking what loyalty really means. Belgium isn't walking away from the relationship, but it's also not assuming that past promises still hold weight. It's choosing to build its own structure within the European framework, something more reliable, more rooted, and less vulnerable to election cycles across the Atlantic. And here's the big lesson we can all take from this. Whether it's in politics, business, or even personal relationships, trust is something that must be nurtured, not taken for granted. Are you, like Belgium, prepared to act when the support you've always relied on begins to waver? Do you have a plan that puts your values and well-being first, even if it means stepping outside of old habits? Because in today's world, the most thoughtful thing you can do might not be holding on. It might be learning how to stand strong on your own terms. Number 6. Switzerland. Let me ask you this. What does it say when a country that's built its entire global identity around neutrality starts pulling away from a long-time partner? Switzerland, the nation often seen as the world's calm voice in a room full of shouting, is now taking a stand, not with anger, but with clarity. In 2025, that famous Swiss silence gave way to a powerful message, one that's resonating far beyond its borders. Lawmakers in Bern made headlines earlier this year by freezing negotiations on a free trade agreement with the United States, not because they wanted conflict, but because they saw the US under Trump's leadership as a growing source of economic pressure and unpredictability. They specifically pointed to what they called divisive and coercive economic tactics coming from Washington, which felt more like ultimatums than cooperation. And that move wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Because while the Swiss may avoid taking sides in war, they won't sit idly by when their economy or principles are being tested. The bigger question here is, can any nation afford to stay silent when the rules keep changing and the consequences could hit home? Instead of retreating into isolation, Switzerland is now leaning into Europe, tightening trade ties, updating its digital and regulatory standards to match the EU, and essentially saying, we'd rather walk with stable partners than run behind unpredictable ones. For a country that once prided itself on balancing between global powers, this realignment is a huge shift. And it's not just happening in government buildings or negotiation rooms, it's in the hearts of the people. Polls from 2025 show that 68% of Swiss citizens now favor stronger cooperation with the EU. A major increase that reflects a public growing tired of watching American trade policy flip-flop with every election cycle. This isn't Switzerland abandoning its roots of neutrality, it's evolving that neutrality into something smarter, something more adaptable. Because in today's world, being neutral doesn't mean staying uninvolved. It means choosing partnerships that actually align with your values, your future, and your peace of mind. Switzerland is not turning hostile toward the US, let's be clear on that, but it is drawing boundaries, choosing stability over chaos, and sending a message many countries are now echoing. Neutrality is not the same as passivity. So here's a thought. How do you define your own version of neutrality in your life? Are you avoiding conflict at all costs? Or are you choosing calm with clarity, peace with principle? Because just like Switzerland in 2025, sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't stay silent, it's speak through action, quietly but decisively. Still with us? That means you're someone who thinks beyond headlines and wants the bigger picture. Type "eyes wide open" in the comments if you're following these 2025 predictions closely. The most surprising revelations are coming up. Don't miss what's next. Number 7. Portugal. What do you do when the world around you starts shifting in unpredictable ways? Do you wait and hope things go back to normal? Or do you begin preparing for something more stable, more self-reliant? Portugal, in 2025, is answering that question not with loud declarations, but with calm and calculated action. Once known as a quiet but loyal ally to the United States, Portugal is now stepping slightly but steadily away from that dynamic, not out of resentment, but out of the kind of maturity that comes from paying attention to the direction the wind is blowing. One of the first public signs of this change came earlier this year when Portugal joined other European countries in updating its travel advisories, warning citizens about new risks tied to US immigration policies that have reportedly led to surprise detainments of European tourists. While this might seem like a small administrative move, it reflects something much deeper, a shift in trust. And trust, once it starts to crack, tends to ripple into every area of a relationship. But rather than dwell on disappointment, Portugal is doing what strong nations and strong people do. It's building. Behind the scenes, the Portuguese government is channeling serious resources into its own industries, focusing on green energy, advanced tech, and domestic innovation. With a €2.5 billion National Innovation Fund now in motion, the goal is clear: develop homegrown solutions and infrastructure that don't depend on American platforms, so that when the global tech landscape shifts again, Portugal isn't left scrambling. And while the economy is a key part of this evolution, the shift is also geopolitical. Portugal is recalibrating its connections, strengthening trade relationships with countries across Africa and Latin America, regions often overlooked by US policy in recent years, and actively participating in deeper EU-led strategic talks. One quiet but telling moment was a closed-door summit in Lisbon, where European officials met to discuss NATO's fragility and what contingencies might be needed if the alliance weakens further. 10 years ago, that conversation would have seemed impossible. Today, it feels prudent. But here's what makes Portugal's approach unique. It's not performative. There are no press conferences boasting about independence or headlines designed to provoke. Instead, there's a quiet dignity in the way Portugal is going about this shift. As if the nation understands that real power doesn't need to shout, and that message, the subtle strength of being prepared without being provoked, is something we can all learn from. In your own life, are you waiting for others to give you stability, or are you building it yourself, piece by piece? Because whether you're a country or an individual, there's real wisdom in creating a future that doesn't rise or fall on someone else's choices. Portugal's calm, thoughtful pivot reminds us that resilience isn't loud, it's deliberate, and it starts long before the storm arrives. Number 8. Ireland. What do you do when the ally you've trusted for decades starts acting in ways that leave you uncertain, even vulnerable? If you're Ireland in 2025, you don't wait. You adapt. Fast. For years, Ireland has enjoyed a strong, even affectionate relationship with the United States, especially when it comes to the economy. American tech giants and pharmaceutical companies have poured billions into Irish jobs and exports, making the US not just a partner, but a cornerstone of Ireland's modern success. But everything changed with the return of Donald Trump and a renewed wave of protectionist policies, particularly new global tariffs that directly threaten Ireland's pharmaceutical exports, worth over €100 billion. Faced with this kind of risk, Irish leaders didn't hesitate. The government issued an updated travel advisory, warning citizens about the risk of detainment under newly enforced US immigration laws, something nearly unthinkable a few years ago. That move wasn't just about safety. It was symbolic, a signal that the bond between the two countries isn't what it used to be. So let me ask you, how do you respond when a reliable source of support starts to feel unstable? Do you hold on out of habit, or do you start building something new? Ireland is choosing the latter. Dublin has launched a bold strategy to reduce its dependence on the US by deepening trade relationships across Europe and expanding into new markets in Asia, particularly South Korea, Japan, and Singapore. These aren't quick fixes. They're long-term moves toward economic resilience. And it's not just policy shifting, public sentiment is too. Polls show a 14% drop in favorable views of US leadership since the beginning of the year. For a country with such deep cultural and historical ties to America, that emotional shift is significant. But it's not about hostility. It's about self-preservation. While Ireland isn't a NATO member, it has often stood by the US on matters of defense and intelligence. Now, the focus is turning toward EU-led security cooperation and a more internally supported economy. Ireland isn't slamming any doors shut, but it's no longer leaning on a relationship that feels unstable. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. So what's the takeaway here? Whether you're leading a country, running a business, or navigating your personal life, blind loyalty can become a risk when the ground keeps shifting. Are you investing in relationships, systems, and habits that actually serve you, or are you holding on because it's familiar? Ireland's pivot reminds us that strength isn't about who you've always counted on. It's about knowing when to step back, reevaluate, and choose a path that leads to stability, even if it means letting go of an old comfort. Number 9. France. What do you do when the ground shifts beneath you? Do you stumble, or do you start building something stronger? France in 2025 has chosen the latter, and under President Emmanuel Macron's leadership, it's not just adjusting to a new geopolitical reality, it's reshaping it. With the return of Donald Trump to the White House and the resurgence of unpredictable US tariffs and isolationist rhetoric, Macron has made it clear that France will no longer sit quietly and hope for stability across the Atlantic. In fact, he described Trump's re-election as an electroshock, a stark warning that Europe can no longer afford to rely on American leadership as a given. Have you ever had a moment like that? When something wakes you up so completely, you know you can't go back to the way things were. That's where France is now. Macron has openly encouraged European companies to pause or even halt investments in the US, framing these latest economic tensions not just as bad policy, but as a direct challenge to Europe's sovereignty. And he's not just talking, he's taking action. France is now leading the charge toward building a fully European defense force, one that can stand on its own whether or not the US decides to show up. Behind the scenes, France, Germany, and Italy are collaborating on real contingency plans, something that would have seemed radical just a few years ago. But this transformation isn't limited to the battlefield. On the economic front, France is also stepping into new territory. In March 2025, Macron's administration signed a €12 billion tech and infrastructure deal with India, Brazil, and a coalition of African nations. notably bypassing the usual reliance on American platforms like Google and Microsoft. These decisions aren't just practical, they're symbolic. France is saying clearly and deliberately that it's time for Europe to lead its own future. And perhaps the clearest sign of this shift is in the tone of diplomacy. Where once there were friendly exchanges and warm handshakes between French and American leaders, there is now formality and distance. The alliance still exists, but the dynamic has changed. France isn't walking away from the US, it's just making sure that it no longer walks behind. And that leads us to an important question. In your own life, are you still depending on people or systems that no longer serve you? Are you adjusting your path, or simply waiting for others to clear the way? France's bold pivot is a reminder that leadership means seeing the storm and choosing to build anyway. The message is clear. When trust wavers, vision must take its place. France is no longer following someone else's map. It's drawing its own and asking others to follow with purpose. Number 10. Germany. Have you ever been in a relationship where the other person slowly starts pulling away, not with anger or drama, but with quiet, intentional distance? That's exactly what we're seeing with Germany in 2025. Once considered the anchor of the US-Europe alliance, Germany is now calmly redrawing the lines of its global strategy. And this time, Washington is no longer at the center. The shift is not loud, but it's deliberate. German businesses, especially in manufacturing and tech, are increasingly sounding the alarm, with more than 80% expecting to take a hit from President Trump's revived trade war policies. Tariffs, once seen as a negotiation tactic, are now viewed as long-term threats, and the mood in Berlin is turning from patience to frustration. Chancellor Friedrich Merz made that crystal clear in a fiery speech to the Bundestag, where he compared the unpredictability of Trump's America to that of Putin's Russia. A shocking but telling moment that made headlines across the world. That's not just political rhetoric, it's a reflection of a deeper realization that the foundations of trust are cracking. Merz didn't stop at warnings. He laid out a bold vision for European independence, including serious questions about NATO's long-term viability if it remains so dependent on the shifting winds of US leadership. This isn't just talk. Germany has committed itself fully to the €800 billion 0 cents Rearm Europe initiative, a major push to reinforce the continent's defense infrastructure without waiting for American support. It's a massive investment in European military and industrial strength, designed to give Europe the ability to act decisively on its own. At the same time, Germany is diversifying its economic lifelines, forging new energy and tech deals with France, China, and Japan, clearly signaling that its future won't be tied to any one partner, especially not one as unpredictable as Trump's United States. What's powerful about Germany's pivot isn't just the strategy, it's the tone. There's no shouting, no public breakups, just a quiet shift in posture. The alliance with the US still exists on paper, but in practice, Germany has emotionally and strategically stepped away. So let me ask you, are there places in your life where you're holding on to something out of habit, even though it no longer gives you stability? Germany's choice is a reminder that sometimes the strongest move is the silent one. The steady decision to prepare, to diversify, to lead rather than follow. In today's world, whether you're running a nation or navigating your own path, resilience isn't built by hoping others won't change. It's built by knowing you can adapt when they do. As we've seen today, from London to Berlin, Europe is no longer waiting for certainty from Washington. These 10 nations are not rejecting the United States. They're simply choosing to adapt, to prepare, and to lead on their own terms. And in that choice, there's a deeper wisdom. Real strength doesn't come from dependence. It comes from awareness, readiness, and trust in one's own path. So ask yourself, are you building your future on someone else's decisions, or are you taking responsibility for your direction? If you found today's video insightful, please support the journey of wisdom by giving this video a like, sharing it with others, and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter in our global exploration. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and stay wise.